So these past few years I've spent many an hour dodging reality with the Meta Quest 2 strapped firmly to my mug, pretending that I'm a badass warrior cleansing a post-apocalyptic world of undead gribblies, or a hapless survivor on an island overrun by hungry, pissed off dinosaurs, or even just a character with hair. I'd love me some hair. But whatever you're into, there's a whole bunch of Meta Quest 2 games that'll whisk you away to an immersive other world, be it complex puzzle titles that'll mull your brain, or high-octane races, or pant-filling horror games that will empty your bowels faster than a laxative sandwich. So here's my pick of the very best Meta Quest 2 games that I've personally played, focusing on the single-player experience. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers!
Good evening, I'm Jeremy Donaldson. Our main stories tonight.
Now, one of my favourite additions to the MetaQuest game store is Not for Broadcast, a satirical sim that has you piloting a fictional news studio from backstage. A decidedly dodgy new government has taken control, and it's up to you whether you help to spread their propaganda to the public or rally against them, with potentially nasty consequences. Now that may sound pretty bloody bleak, but Not for Broadcast is wickedly funny, chucking in lots of deliciously dark humour. Each broadcast will keep you on your toes as you have to juggle lots of little tasks, from switching camera angles and battling pesky distortion to censoring anything that could potentially traumatise any weans watching at home. And that includes quite a few F-bombs, by the way. Not for Broadcast is really rather sweary at times. Even the tutorial has about a dozen or so so it's definitely not one for the kiddies. Thankfully, the learning curve isn't rough, and there's a choice of difficulty levels, including a story mode if you'd rather just enjoy the action rather than worry about the plug being pulled midway through a show. Overall, cracking stuff. Next up is Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, a specially crafted VR campaign which tosses you right onto the front line in World War II, and as you dodging explosions on battlefields, infiltrating enemy HQs, commandeering tanks, and hurtling down snowy mountains, all while those Nazi bastards try their best to blow your bloody brains out. Now, I've been a massive Medal of Honor fan ever since the thrilling originals came out on Sony's very first PlayStation, and this virtual reality release definitely does the series justice. It's easily one of the most cinematic games on the MetaQuest right now, throwing some majestic and memorable set pieces your way, with plenty of satisfying gameplay and some suspenseful stealthy moments to mix things up a bit. As well as a multiplayer mode, Above and Beyond serves up a meaty slice of single-player goodness lasting hours and hours. Although admittedly, a significant chunk of that time is taken up with lengthy cutscenes and chatty bits to dump info and break up the action a bit. Still, this Medal of Honor VR experience is one of the most engrossing and enjoyable MetaQuest titles right now, and an absolute must-play for any FPS fans. Now, another MetaQuest 2 VR game that I've only just started playing is Light Brigade, a roguelite shooter that's tougher than an elephant's ball bag, and yet also strangely compelling. Light Brigade demands a slow, methodical approach to clear its procedurally generated levels. You can't just charge about the place blasting away like a mentalist, because you'll last all of about 5 seconds. The further you progress, the more goodies you'll unlock to help keep you from expiring violently, including spells, beefier weapons, and special bonuses. You'll even unlock extra classes, up to 6 in total, with the usual strengths and weaknesses when tackling different situations. I'm going to keep on plugging away at it, but certainly if you like ruddy, tough roguelikes, then this is going to ring all of your bells and then some. And I've also got to give a quick shout out to Kill It With Fire, which is crazy amounts of fun, assuming that you aren't actually a raging arachnophobe, in which case it's probably the worst thing you could do to yourself beyond moving to the Australian outback. Don't expect any kind of nuanced, multi-layered narrative. This is absolutely a dumb arcade experience that has you annihilating swarms of 8-legged home invaders with a fantastic variety of over-the-top weapons. You can basically use anything in grabbing distance to exterminate your spidery nemesis, including but not limited to saucepans, hoovers, handguns, even flamethrowers and other heavy weaponry like that. I'd say that it's best enjoyed in short bursts, but Kill It With Fire is one that I gladly return to just for a quick bit of action every few days or so, even though I've personally got nought against those dinky bin dwellers. So undoubtedly one of the greatest Oculus Quest games right now is Resident Evil 4 VR, a straight up port of the classic action game that puts you right in the beefcake body of Leon S. Kennedy as he shoots angry Europeans in the face over and over and over again. Of course, Resident Evil 4 has been ported to pretty much every console ever in existence. I'm pretty sure you can even play it on a pocket calculator these days, and for good reason too, because it is proper mint. From the opening assault on the village to the cack your pants session with a giant lake gribbly thing, Resident Evil 4 is one of the most entertaining games ever designed. In first person, that combat feels even more fluid as well as more personal, and thankfully I didn't feel motion sickness at all, despite constantly dodging all over the place, avoiding flying axes and those chainsaw dickheads. It is a real shame though that cutscenes and cutaways, basically anything where you're not in direct control of Leon, still play out as a boring 2D movie, and it's particularly jarring when, for instance, you knock down a ladder and you're instantly pulled out of Leon's body, you watch the ladder falling down in 2D and then you're back into the action. It's, yeah, very bizarre. But that and a couple of minor gripes aside, this VR port works really well, and it's well worth a playthrough even if you've done the original game to death. Now, if you're in the mood for some more light-hearted VR fare, well, definitely check out I Expect You to Die 2, which is unsurprisingly the sequel to I Expect You to Die, which, by the way, if you haven't played either of these games, some of the best fun you can have with one of these things strapped to your bonce. This tongue-in-cheek adventure slaps you in the sexy tux of a secret agent and thrusts you into various perilous, far-fetched situations. You'll need all of your wits to solve the many puzzles and escape each scenario unharmed, so don't go down in too many martinis first. With its tongue-in-cheek humour, clever mind twisters, and impressive interactivity, I Expect You to Die and I Expect You to Die 2 are just absolutely bloody delightful, although also pretty damn short. Now, even if you feel like you've reached absolute saturation point with the constant barrage of Marvel content, I would still recommend checking out Iron Man VR, a wild arcade-style shooter that has you zipping about the skies as Mr. Tony himself, blasting bothersome drones out of the skies while spitting out the usual wisecracks. You might think that chucking yourself about the place with 360-degree freedom would be a one-way ticket to Puke City, but I personally found the experience surprisingly easy on the stomach as long as you aren't hanging after a big night out. The action is smooth and the controls are well implemented and surprisingly easy to master, considering you'll be flying, shooting and punching stuff to bits all at the same time. That gameplay can unfortunately be a bit repetitive despite the exciting set pieces, while the non-combat bits slow things down somewhat as well, but Iron Man VR is a blast while it lasts, and definitely a good one for adrenaline junkies. On a similar vein, I'm still hoping that we get a decent Spiderman VR game at some point, but a kind of unofficial version already exists on the Meta Quest 2 in the form of Resist. This mission-driven adventure game has you swinging around a virtual city just like the Webbed Wonder, except here you've got a couple of guns to blow away any bothersome enemies. I was actually quite surprised that I didn't immediately want to hurl my guts up while launching myself around this shiny and surprisingly massive city, but the devs have chucked in quite a variety of control methods and comfort-based options, so you're bound to find something that works for you. Just dicking about soaring from one end of the place to another is fun enough once you get used to the controls, that is, but you've also got a number of missions to complete tied together with a typically hokey comic book style plot. And the further you progress, the beefier you'll become, thanks to an upgrade system similar to the aforementioned Spider-Man games. Overall, it's pretty cracking stuff, and certainly the only VR game about swinging that is worth a go. Another action-packed VR title that recently hit the Meta Quest 2 is Runner, a shooty biking extravaganza that was clearly more than a little bit inspired by the awesome Akira anime. It's not subtle, but it sure is stylish, and you certainly won't be bored by a single second, taking down seemingly endless swarms of baddies while trying your best not to smash into the many obstacles that pop up in your path. Not gonna lie, Runner will likely wear you down if you don't have the reflexes of a highly caffeinated F1 driver, because you'll see the game over screen so many times it'll probably invade your dreams. That learning curve is pretty steep, as you need to juggle steering with shooting off your bike cannons and pistols, hoying grenades at stuff, taking down shields, all kinds of shenanigans. But once it all clicks, you'll feel like the ultimate badass carving a path through the swaths of enemies and beating 7 shades out of the obligatory tough as nails bosses at the end of each level. Now if you're up for adorable platformer type shenanigans, then Lucky's Tale is another must try. Like Astrobot on the PSVR, this has you controlling that titular big-eyed fox thing as he leaps about several colourful wee environments, murdering all of the local wildlife and generally making himself a bit of a nuisance. There's not much of a story here, admittedly something about your pig getting swiped by a bug-eyed tentacle thing, but that doesn't really matter. What's important is that the platforming is an absolute bloody joy, as long as you can handle some occasionally tricky, well-timed jumps in a 3D space. Like Astrobot, the difficulty level is just about challenging enough for adults to enjoy, helped along by the added time trials and coin collection challenges, but younger gamers should be able to make it through without too much trouble. Likewise, VR platforming fans should definitely check out the Moss games, which star an adorable wee mousie as she runs around lushly detailed environments, twatting robo-bugs with her tiny sword. Gameplay mostly involves tinkering with each mini level to open up the exit, which you'll do by directly guiding Quill the mouse around using the left thumbstick, as well as grabbing and yanking things with your own disembodied hands. It's an intuitive setup, albeit one with occasionally mildly irritating platformy moments. Every so often you'll find yourself battling a bunch of bugs with your sword, which helps to break up some of the puzzling shenanigans and inject a bit of excitement. The difficulty level is low, but Moss is still great fun, and the sequel, Book 2, is a direct continuation of the story, so if you crave more of the same, then fill your boots. Anyway, let's shift back from cutie cartoon characters to nasty, gory, gritty, zombie-filled VR nightmares with the rather excellent Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. This melancholic post-apocalyptic tale that has civilization plunged into chaos and humans turning against their own kind in horrifying fashion could easily be mistaken for real life these days, but it's actually a pretty smart first-person survival adventure. From your base, which is inexplicably a bus parked up in a graveyard, you'll find yourself piecing together clues to find a legendary bunker, filled with enough supplies to last a lifetime. All the while you'll need to scavenge for food, bandages, weapons and materials that you can strip down and use to craft more useful items. The real joy of Saints and Sinners is that tense exploration. You'll need to creep cautiously through the skeletal remains of civilization, either sneaking by the shuffling dead or ending their misery with a brutal selection of melee and ranged weapons. The stealth mechanics are solid, and going one-on-one with a zombie and a shiv never gets old. You can't just poke that rusty blade into the head with a pathetic wee jab, you need to properly swing it into their skull and penetrate that brain to put their lights out proper. Not enough force and you just end up grappling with a seriously miffed off corpse. It's suitably groovy and it's bloody amazing. And tension is ramped up even further because you are working against the clock. If your wristwatch goes into the red, that means the bells are going to toll and the Walking Dead are going to flood the streets, which is about as much fun as being in blue water on a Saturday afternoon. And if you enjoyed Saints and Sinners, well, good news! You can keep that gore flowing with Chapter 2 Retribution, which is basically more of the same but even more badass. One of the best additions is the terrifying night raids, which reward you with big loot payoffs, providing you actually survive the crowds of knocked off nocturnal brain coveters. Thankfully you can kit yourself out with Retribution's upgraded arsenal to give yourself a fighting chance. Chopping down hordes of flesh gobblers with a massive chainsaw or blasting them to bits with a sawn-off shotgun, yes bloody please. Oh, and you'll also face off against a Resident Evil Nemesis style big scary dude, so definitely keep that spare pair of pants on standby. Retribution can be a bit buggy unfortunately, but the devs are hard at work patching it, so it's more stable now compared with when it first hit the Quest 2. And if you won the first game, it's less than a tenner to unlock this continuation, so absolutely go for it. And if the sound of that really basted your Christmas spuds, well, definitely check out Arizona Sunshine as well. Yes, it is yet another first-person zombie survival shootery thingy with very similar mechanics indeed, but it is also a classic and it's been spruced up for the Oculus Quest 2. The plot is a little light, but like The Walking Dead, this first-person adventure really makes you feel like you're lost in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. Once again, you'll be foraging for resources while putting brain-munching buggers out of their misery, but there's more emphasis on action here, and capping an undead fiend from 30 yards with a jizz-tastic headshot never gets old. Arizona Sunshine's puzzles are admittedly easy even for a boozed-up northerner, mostly involving finding a key or pushing a button. But when you have dozens of zombies closing in on you with only a few bullets to spare, it is a proper thrill ride. Those visuals, which were already pretty stunning, have been given a bit of spit and polish for the Oculus Quest 2, and the physics seem improved as well, so now those zombies behave in an even more naturalistic manner, at least as natural as a walking stiff could ever behave. If you happen to be more of a fan of dinosaurs rather than rotten, reanimated corpses, well, Jurassic World Aftermath is definitely worth some of your time. Aftermath has you exploring the infamous island after things went a bit wrong and those dinos got all bitey, but you're not here on your hauls. Rather, you have to evade those pesky raptors while trying to escape with all your bits intact. Besides the ravenous raptors, there's a bunch of simple puzzles to tackle, and exploring the ruined halls is a lot of fun, even if interaction is depressingly limited. And despite the colourful cartoon graphics, those dino encounters are proper pants shredding, so thank the baby Jesus you got lots of convenient lockers scattered about the place to cower inside of. Horror fans with bowels of concrete who want to further destroy what remains of their Y-fronts should also check out Exorcist Legion VR, which offers up several episodes of absolute heart-stopping terror. And the new Twilight Zone VR game is kind of interesting enough to warrant a look if you see it really cheap, but it does feel quite rushed and a little bit simplistic. Now, one of the most impressive new titles to hit the MetaQuest is Bonelab, a rejiggered version of Boneworks, which mostly runs well on this standalone shiny helmet. Those graphics have been scaled back somewhat from the Steam VR version, and occasionally the frame rate drops when things get a bit mental. But this is still a hilariously enjoyable sandbox title which gifts you with all manner of weaponry and allows you to get all medieval on a host of hapless enemies. Now, every object in the game has a realistic kind of weight to it, so if you find yourself wielding a mighty axe or a massive f***off sledgehammer, it can feel pretty awkward until you get the hang of it. You'll encounter simple puzzles that can be solved any way you see fit, as well as endless baddies to club, slice and blast into virtual chunks. And the devs have even chucked in a selection of mini-games to keep you busy and help you learn the controls, which can certainly feel quite fiddly at times. The plot's a bit threadbare and it's plenty janky, but Bonelab is still an absolutely wild time, so get it got! Another great Oculus Quest game that's been updated for the MetaQuest 2 is Trover Saves the Universe. This action platformer is from the diseased yet brilliant mind of Justin Roiland, one of the sick puppies behind Rick and Morty, and that potty-mouthed eccentric humour is well and truly ingrained in Trover, which sees you floating about in a chair while guiding a purple sweary thing through all manner of levels, twatting things and generally getting up to mischief. It's simple stuff, but it's so batshit mental and funny that it is well worth picking up. Now, if you're after an immersive sim that'll really test your mental faculties and it's absolutely gorgeous to boot, well, one of my favourites on the MetaQuest 2 right now is Red Matter. This acclaimed sci-fi adventure has you exploring a spookily deserted space base, brainiacking your way through environmental puzzles while figuring out what the ruddy heck happened to all the previous inhabitants. You'll be pulling levers, tweaking knobs and fiddling with machinery to progress deeper into the base's bowels. Helped along by an incredibly useful scanner which can translate any Russian text, and also tell you what stuff actually is before you muck about with it. The second Red Matter is a direct continuation of the story and basically more of the same. Gorgeous graphics, impressive interactivity, and a thick, ominous atmosphere that'll keep you on edge throughout. These games are a fantastic showcase for the MetaQuest's abilities, although they're also most definitely deliberately paced, slow burn adventures that won't be to all tastes. So if you're more into fast, frantic action with stuff constantly flying at your face, then maybe check out Pistol Whip instead. This is basically an on-rail shooter where your sole purpose is to pick off every bugger what pops up from behind the scenery. Every level is set to a different song and you get bonus points for plugging your foes in time to the beat, so it's kind of like an ultra-violent version of Just Dance. In this 2089 update, a proper campaign mode has been bunged in alongside the original levels, and to be honest, the campaign's plot is about as meaty as a vegan sausage roll, but who cares? It's basically more levels for free, huzzah! And to jazz things up, the campaign also features fresh enemy models, some cool new weapons, and twists on the original gameplay. The best thing about Pistol Whip is that it makes you feel like a proper badass, even if you're just a bald middle-aged dickhead poncing about in his living room. Another new MetaQuest 2 game that strikes a similar chord is Gun Jam VR. Gameplay is near identical, with a seemingly endless supply of enemies popping up from all directions and bonus points awarded for plugging them in time to the beat. It's strangely addictive, sweat-inducing stuff, boasting a cracking soundtrack packed with rocky, bass-heavy dance numbers. Gun Jam VR boasts enough variety in its enemy types and weapons to keep things interesting, although the auto-aim is overly generous to the point where it's difficult to hit those explosive barrels lurking behind your witless foes. And you can't fire both weapons at once either, which is a bit of a bummer. And while we're discussing shooting things in the face in a satisfying manner over and over and over again, another absolute stone-cold classic here on the MetaQuest 2 is of course Superhot VR. The hook here is that enemies move only when you do, so at any point you can just freeze and plan out your next move. Should I grab this guy's gun and blast him in the face, or maybe just take him down with a well-aimed pool ball to the nads? The world is your violent oyster. Heads up though, you will need a good bit of free space to play it, as you'll actually have to move around ducking and dodging and uppercutting some dude's junk and what have you. Any Star Wars fans out there are well serviced to buy the good old Oculus Quest 2 as well, and you'll probably sploosh yourself silly at Tales from Galaxy's Edge, which is absolutely stuffed full of fan service. You play as a simple droid repair technician whose mission is to salvage some valuable cargo that you just jettisoned. You'll spend most of your time exploring the lush planet of Batu and blasting holes in unfriendly gang members who are after your precious booty. Although your enemies are about as clever as a box of Pop-Tarts, that combat is still good fun. You'll feel pretty badass dual-wielding blasters, and I really like how you can chuck your old weapons when they're spent and grab pistols from fallen foes. It is a shame that Tales from Galaxy's Edge is rather on the short side, like quite a lot of VR adventures to be perfectly honest, but at least there is a bit of unlockable bonus content that is very different from the standard main gameplay. And the Vader's Quest trilogy will also probably delight fans, but any casual dippers into the Star Wars lore probably won't find much to hold their attention here beyond the occasional bit of hot lightsaber action. And let's face it, who doesn't enjoy wanging around a massive glowing sword? And last up for the action games, I'm still a big fan of Robo Recall, a fun and fast-paced arcade title that has you blasting and slapping rogue robots into tiny metal chunks. It's simple, but it's highly addictive carnage and definitely an essential purchase for Oculus Quest 2. Now, one of the most addictive games that I played recently on the Meta Quest is Walkabout Mini Golf, which is exactly what you'd expect it to be. Several rounds of crazy golf shenanigans to suit putters of all ages and abilities. Holes range from your usual fare with rocks and tunnels to absolutely mental efforts that you'd never actually see on a real life course, taking full advantage of the VR escapades. There's a hardcore version of each course to tackle once you're confident enough, missing balls to find dotted about the place, and basically hours of absolute joy thanks to the realistic physics and stellar design work. Now next up, one of the most infamous and best-selling adventure titles of all time has been given a fresh lease of life here on the Oculus Quest 2 as well. I'm talking of course about Myst, which like Resident Evil has already been re-released God knows how many times, but all the same I still get a thrill wandering through those familiar worlds in VR. It's still as tough as a rhino's arse, and the puzzle randomizer feature means that even veterans won't breeze through it. My only complaint is that taking notes while you're playing the game is a wee bit awkward, basically involving taking off the headset, making a note, putting it back on and such forth. Some sort of automatic note-taking tool in-game would have been really bloody helpful, but hopefully that'll be implemented in some future patch. But all the same, anyone who loves a good puzzle, especially a good super tough puzzle that'll have you smacking your head off the nearest wall until everything goes pleasantly numb, should definitely get involved. And any adventure game fans out there should also get a kick out of A Fisherman's Tale, which is certainly one of the more unique and innovative titles available for this sleek white helmet. This time around you play as a wooden puppet who lives in a lighthouse, naturally, and who also spends his spare time working on a small wooden replica of his homestead. But one day when you lift the roof off, you discover a tiny version of yourself in there. And not just that, but your own home's roof appears to have lifted off and now an enormous you is looming overhead. Thus begins an absolute mindfuck of an adventure where you basically have to solve puzzles by passing items between big you and little you in order to manipulate your environment. And yes, I realise I'm making about as much sense as I usually do after 10 pints of bitter, but really it's one of those games you just have to play and experience for yourself. It is a work of pure genius, and getting through will take some proper lateral thinking as well as some thorough exploration and perhaps a healthy dose of illicit substances. Factor in the surprisingly emotional story and that slick presentation, and this is one of my favourite all-time titles for the Oculus Quest 2. Another VR mind bender that's well worth picking up is the Last Clockwinder, which sees you striving to save an ancient clockwork tree with the help of magical robot cloning gloves. And yes, that sentence does make it sound like I'm basically on all of the drugs, but hang on a second, let me explain. What you'll essentially be doing in this game is harvesting fruit, lots and lots of fruit. But you can't do this single-handed. Instead, push a button on your controller and then record yourself performing an action like plucking fruit and tossing it merrily into a collection barrel. Push the button again and poof, up pops a robot slave who'll happily repeat that exact action over and over for the rest of time. At first you'll be trying to set up the most efficient robo labs possible, but as you unlock more rooms with more complex requirements, you'll find that these robots must work together with perfect timing to get any kind of result. Thankfully you can immediately scrap any robot that has gone a little bit wrong, and chances are that's something you'll be doing hundreds of bloody times before you finally see this game's end. There is a sweet little story running through the Last Clockwinder, which is gradually revealed via conveniently scattered tape recorders, the kind of shit that game developers just can't get enough of. But even without that, this is one of the most engrossing and addictive VR puzzlers out there. And lots of love also goes to Room VR, a dark matter, which has been built from the ground up for virtual reality, although it does work in much the same way as those mobile games. A dark matter casts you as a London detective in the early 20th century, and your objective is to find out what happened to a missing archaeologist who just mysteriously vanished. To do that, you'll have to trace his final steps and figure out a bunch of sometimes ridiculously intricate puzzle boxes, prodding buttons and twisting knobs until you manage to unlock the secrets. Being able to lean in and closely examine each object from every angle definitely makes a dark matter even more immersive, while you once again have a selection of supernatural lenses that can transform your surroundings with eerie results. Fireproof Games has really made the most of this platform. The Room VR looks stunning and plays beautifully, sucking you in from the very first moments and keeping you gripped. Be warned though, it's also tougher than a week-old chicken nugget, so if you turn off that built-in hint system, well, get ready for some serious brain ache. Now, another brilliant recent addition to the Oculus Store, and one for any survival fans out there, is A Song in the Smoke. This challenging title has you crafting tools, foraging for food, and fighting off beasties as you search for 3 purple glowing rocks for reasons. This is hardcore stuff. There's not a Primark in sight, so you'll have to skin animals to clothe yourself and build campfires at night to ward away the horrible gribblies that lurk in the darkness. It's very tough stuff and definitely not for the weak of heart, especially with the limited number of saves in each stage, so only true hardcore survivalists should apply. Now, if you're missing going down to the gym to burn off all of those Christmas mince pies and port, well, there is some relief to be had in Fit XR, a very worthy VR exercise app that started as a boxing sim type thing, but now it's expanded to include even more workout types. The sweat-inducing boxing sessions have you smacking 10 bells out of floaty orb things as they hurtle towards your face. Definitely a very enjoyable virtual workout with a range of difficulty levels and a decent variety of hip-hop, rock, dance and pop tunes to get you punching to the beat. And that has now expanded to include HIIT training and dance sessions as well, so you've got a good bit of variety of stuff on there. Although it is a subscription-based service, you will have to spunk up £7 a month in order to get involved.
If you'd rather not pay a monthly subscription, then I also highly recommend Les Mills Body Combat. A one-off fee grants you access to dozens of intense workouts that really engage every muscle in your body. And by engage, I mean absolutely punish until you're basically a sweaty, flabby puddle of human flesh. You've got more varied moves compared with Fit XR, while the trainers do a great job of keeping you motivated, even if they do make the same annoying joke about drinking tea in a crap British accent over and over and over.
And you'll also get a decent workout from Audica, a highly satisfying Oculus Quest rhythm-based game which has you dual-wielding pistols and blasting fast-moving targets to the beat of a pumping dance soundtrack. On the more advanced levels, you'll need instant reactions to clear everything zipping by, while modifiers such as invisible guns make life considerably more difficult. I've also got to give big love to Synth Riders, an excellent rhythm game that has you fist pumping all over to punch coloured balls before they smack you in the gob. There's a great selection of tunes to bop along to, including dance, dubstep, rock, and even some swing. And I've got even more love for Smash Drums, a title that leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. All you gotta do is pummel supernatural floating skins as they drift towards you, keeping to the beat, while pulling off a good bit of proper flair every now and then. Absolutely banging. So that right there, my lovelies, is my pick of the very best single-player MetaQuest 2 experiences you can bag yourself right now. But no doubt I missed out a few of your own personal faves because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of titles available right now. So please do clue me in as to what a massive I am down in the comments below. Let us know your own personal picks. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a really wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!